There are a lot of ways to build a career. Most people find something that works and stays inside it. That's not a criticism. It takes a certain kind of courage just to stay, do the work, and get really good at something over decades. Today's guest is someone who did that. 20 years in group health insurance. 7 years ago, he made a deliberate bet. Medicare was the space he wanted to own. He was right. He spent several years running both building a book of business inside a company he'd given 2 decades of his career to. Then that company got sold. Instead of finding another corporate home, he stood on his own 2 feet, opened his own practice in Massachusetts, 3 doors down from Social Security, which I love. Built a team of downline agents and has been running his own thing ever since. He serves people navigating some of the most critical and crucial times in their lives. What their healthcare looks like in retirement. In an industry where most people hear the word insurance, they hang the phone up. He shows up every day anyway. That's the story we're going to dig in today. Please welcome David Dupuy Jr. to Process Over Pressure. Welcome, David.
Thank you for having me, Chad. I appreciate it.
It is really an honor. Most people, when they hear the word insurance or medical insurance or any type of insurance, people clam up, right? They don't want to talk about it. Make very nervous. They get to a place where, it's a scary subject. So, you've been doing this most of your life. So what is it that you find is most relative in this that you kind of maybe approach or comfort people when you're opening up that conversation?
So where I'm at in the position that I'm in, my approach is we are heavily, heavily reliant on education first. So
Nice.
so we want all our clients to know what Medicare is, how it works, what their options are. We try and do that in a way that's digestible. My philosophy is there's an unlimited amount of information out there, but a very small amount actually gets distilled to wisdom so that people can walk away and say, all right, I think I get the basic concepts and I know what my choices are and I know what the pros and cons of those choices are. So that's kind of what we do is we educate, and then what we're trying to do is make sure that everybody knows the pros and cons of what their choices are. And quite honestly, there's no silver bullet here. There is solutions that are a good fit for people's specific needs.
So I don't think a lot of people know what senior health insurance is. Like, what is that? They know insurance, but but for those out there listening, that's like, you know, that maybe don't want to admit it, but probably like, hey, I really don't even know what senior health insurance is. What is that? Maybe you can give us an overview of just kind of a little bit about, what is that? What is it that you specifically, I guess, that's different than any other insurance, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, our insurance actually starts for most people when they're leaving group health. I mean, that's 90% of our clients. So it's
Yeah.
their first time off a group health plan. And quite honestly, it can be overwhelming and scary for people because most people live in a world where they have a group health plan, and that group health plan distills their choices to like two, maybe three choices tops. There's a different cost, and then there's kind of a different benefit structure, and they get maybe two bullets and they say, I want to go with option 1, 2, or maybe even 3. Okay. And that's it. That's the limit of what they have to know and the choices they have to make. That's why we're so heavily reliant on education. Number one, gathering the correct data from the prospective clients. Number two, and just making sure we kind of distill it to something that's digestible and easy to understand. So for us, it's important to educate. So what senior health insurance is, hey, as you get older, you're eligible for Medicare. You can go on Medicare at any point, even if you have group health. We actually surprise a lot of people by offering better options. And then B, now that you're retiring, gonna retire, something's happened with the group health plan, now we take you on and we're able to educate you on what your next steps are. The goal obviously is to maintain the relationship for as long as that we possibly can,
Yeah.
because we get paid a small amount of money for a lot of people, and we want to maintain those relationships over a long period of time. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what we are. We have added stuff now in the last few years. So we do service. There's a demographic that's between 58 and 64 that wants to retire and doesn't want to wait to 65. And they don't know what the insurance world looks like. So we
Yeah.
service them as well.
Oh, that's interesting. I think, that Gen X maybe area where they're like, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna retire a little early. I want to 58." Yeah, that's a great point. Never thought about that. It's like try to navigate leaving work insurance into the Medicare or those type of insurances. That's interesting. So, David, when we talked earlier, we kind of had a little pre-podcast and just how to kind of get to know you a little bit. One of the things that stood out to me was here's a guy who for 20 years worked in insurance, like for somebody, and after that's a long time. I mean, that's a good chunk of time being in an industry, and then what was it like when you decided when you said, you know what, I'm I'm doing this on my own. What made you kind of finally decide to do that? And what was that feeling like when you walked out of that? We got a lot of listeners that are probably in your shoes. I've been in your shoes. I know exactly how you feel it. Like, do I stay in corporate America? Do I stay keep doing this? Or, it's comfortable over here and then step out and do your own thing. What was that like for you?
Yeah, for me, I was able to ease into it. I was very blessed to come into a situation where I started with my employer, like you mentioned, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But I was like employee number 7, I believe, or 8 with them, and they grew tremendously. By the time the owner sold the company 20 years later, we had like 170 employees. So I was very blessed, number one, to have a long-term relationship with the CEO and the head of benefits at that time for an extended period of time, 20 years. They knew everything that I was capable of and worked with me and allowed me to touch every part of their business and train me on it and learn on it. So it was a little easier when that time finally came. We didn't do Medicare there. I had suggested we do it. The head of benefits said, "We're not doing that, but if you wanna do it, we'd be happy to use you as a resource." So I was blessed that they used me as a resource. They actually helped me along the path.
No, that's
That's
nice.
a Yeah, that's a very rare situation. Obviously, when you do finally make the choice that you're gonna make the jump, it's always a little scary,
Yeah.
but I've had enough ramp up time with my company to generate revenue that I was like, "Okay, I've generated some revenue. I can offset my losses from leaving full-time employment and rely on that." And then to go along with that, I've seen the growth in how the industry I'm in can compound and can compound pretty quickly. So I
Yeah.
figured once I did do this 100% full time, it would grow quicker by like X than it was growing at the time, which is incrementally. And that's exactly what happened. So
Yeah.
for me, I was very blessed to be in a wonderful situation with wonderful people who
Yeah.
to this day I'm grateful for and maintain relationships with. But it's scary, and it's like you got to trust yourself, got to make the dive. I listen to enough stuff that I'm like, got to do this sometime.
Yeah.
And there is some relief when you pull the trigger, and then you're so focused on making it work that you don't really look back and say, what if it doesn't work? You can't really afford to do that. You got to take your life vest off and just jump in and learn how to swim as good as you can. And as long as you stay afloat, then eventually you're going to be swimming, just fine without your life vest.
Yeah, I always tell people it's like standing on that hideout and you're right at the edge of it and you're like, I want to go. No, I'm going to go. No, it's like, do I do it? Do I not? And eventually, those either come back down the ladder or they jump, right? That's the options you have. You either climb back down or jump. And, It is a lot like that, and you either just continuously, I can tell you for me, I probably walked up to the ladder, looked at the edge 10 times and came back down. But finally taking that jump, it's like I have moments where, and I'm sure you do too, where I'm like, "What did I just do?"
Yeah.
And no, so think about that moment maybe where there was a time that you were like, "Okay, it's me now. What did I just do?" Did you ever have that moment got in your head? Like, you may
So
not remember the time, but
no, no. Well, personally, I think that you get that time. Let's put it this way: many years into this, there are still sleepless nights, and where all I do is think about the business, and then all I do is wonder, is this thing going to be around? Like what's going to happen? Like that. I don't know that that ever goes away,
yeah,
no matter what. The other thing is you talked about like, taking that jump and making that decision when you have your own thing and the buck stops with you. You have to climb that ladder and make that decision similar to that pretty much every day or at least many times. You get a little calloused from it, and you can get up there and be like, well, I got to jump. So boom,
yeah,
jump and do it without thinking. But
yeah.
I do have my sleepless nights. It just
That's
depends
good.
on where I am or where the business is and trying to fix it. But, you know, you got to have faith, quite honestly. You got to have faith in yourself.
You do, and I think that's, when it comes down to end of the day, you either have enough confidence in yourself that you're gonna take the gamble on yourself or you're not, right? And only people who know that are you individually. Like, am I worth I always tell people, "Are you worth to take the gamble on? Would you bet on yourself?" And if the answer is yes, then you should try it, right? It's not for everybody. I get that, and that's okay. It's not a knock if you're not. But at some point, you have to say, you have to say, "Am I going to do this or am I not going to do this?" Because you can't complain if you don't try, right? You can never go back and go, "Well, I could have done this." You got to either do it or don't, right? It's just really the way it goes. David, one thing I do want to talk about in this because I think this is a great platform to be able to talk a little bit about Medicare, and if that's okay with you, because look, let's be honest, Medicare has a reputation. We all know that it does. You hear it out there. There's every time you turn the news on, there's always negative things about it. There's this negative thought. And so, I am pretty sure I don't do your job, but I'm pretty sure people hear insurance and especially Medicare and insurance, they kind of put a wall up. How do you break through that? And does that ever get to you a little bit? Like that constant trying to ease people's mind? Does that ever kind of tell me your experience on that?
So in terms of there is a perception, you're absolutely right. So what I try and break is when I first start engaging with people, I must ask them, all right, so what have you what have you heard about Medicare?
Oh, that's
Because
good.
everybody comes to me with preconceived notions. Their
Yeah.
neighbor told them, their doctor told them, their nurse told them, their cousin told them, and they have preconceived notions. And all I'm trying to do is vet whether their preconceived notions are actually accurate or inaccurate.
That's good.
And many times it's inaccurate. And it's inaccurate because unfortunately they're getting one person's view of the world and their own experience in their own, you know, little micro bubble, as it
Yeah.
pertains to them. And that doesn't mean that that's how it pertains to everybody.
Yeah.
And, it's like, you don't want to do this, so you want to do that. And that's what a lot of people say. But the reality is, it depends on that person's situation in a number of factors. What's their health? What's their financial situation? Where do they live? What doctors do they have? Like, it's so many different, what's their risk tolerance like? There's so many different factors that go into it that breaking those preconceived notions is absolutely one of my top priorities or the number one thing that I have to do because everybody's got thoughts about it. And you're right. Most of the thoughts are negative in certain
Yeah.
situations. I heard this, I heard that about this plan or that plan or not to do this. So I gotta break a lot of that off. There's also the preconceived notion that a lot of people remain on a group health plan that don't necessarily need to remain on a group health plan. they might be able to get better coverage for less money by going to Medicare. And like I said, I do 90% of my clients are that. So we kind of break down those walls as well. Like, hey, do you want to take a look at this? And, let
Yeah.
us explain exactly what your out of pocket cost is going to be and what benefits you're going to get in return. And hey, let's compare it to what you got now. All right. And a lot of people are surprised when we take them through the process. They're like, I didn't think it'd be this good or this price. Many times we do hear, I wish I had done this earlier. I should have done this a couple years ago, but that's water under the bridge at that point. But yeah, there's a lot of preconceived notions. There's a lot of things that they hear and see on TV, hear from neighbors, hear from friends, hear from doctors. And a lot of it's either not true or doesn't fit in the context that is appropriate to them.
I think that's so good, and I hope our listeners, what I'm hearing is, and I'll be honest with you, I'm probably one of those that had the perceived notion and stuff like that, but listening to you and trying to talk about it, it's, and I can tell just by my opportunity being with you is that you take the time to really walk people through and kind of answer questions. I think that's probably the biggest, I would think you would say, is answering the questions and giving them a chance to ask anything they want and process through that to kind of understand what they're really getting is important. And I'm sure I know that's your approach because I've met you and know you. Like really bringing them alongside and giving them the opportunity to talk about it and understand the pros and cons of each scenario. That's what I hear kind of pulls that anxiety down a little bit, I bet.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing that I'll make a point to do too is when they say my neighbor told me, my doctor told me, or I saw it on TV, we break that down too. All
Yeah.
right. So like that doesn't fit you. Here's why. They may have said it because in their situation, here's what they may be going through too. Because you just don't want to, you know, completely dismiss people and say, yeah, well, that's wrong,
Yeah.
it's like you wanna explain this is what their thought process probably is, but here's why it doesn't pertain to you, you know? Um, so yeah, it's in education's huge, and not the world's most patient person in the world, but it has taught me a great deal of patience
Yeah, I
to
bet.
stop and listen and then take your time and explain, and if it means explaining multiple times, then so be it, because it can be a complex product and insurance to understand how it works.
Yeah. No, that's so good. So David, you own your own business, and so you have to be the sales guy, you have to be the janitor, you have to be the HR, you have to be the problem solver. You have to do you wear a lot of hats, right? You do a lot of things. It all, the word they say, the buck stops with you, right? Like it's you're the guy. What What's probably the hardest part of being in charge that nobody ever really talks about?
The hardest part about being in charge is your job never ends. So it's like that's the toughest part is there is no downtime. Part of that is on me. Like you have to be consciously building the ability to step away. And I haven't been in business long enough to have mastered that skill set yet. Even though I try and can step away for a while, it's just you're always got your hands in it.
Yeah,
And I'm slowly learning how to pull my hands out of it, because I want it to be able to run without me having to be so heavily involved. I joked with another guy that owned a business. I'm like, hey, the great thing about owning a business is I can take a vacation if I want at any time. And when I'm on vacation, I only have to work a couple hours every day. But there's some truth to that, right? Like when you own your own business, it's like I can go away whenever I want, but I got to work anyway. So I just kind of mix it in, and what I got to do is build a better model that I can step away and then
yeah,
I can jump back in. And that's
yeah. I mean,
that's that's the biggest challenge, quite honestly.
yeah. No, I appreciate you being honest. I think that you're absolutely correct. When we own something, it's ours. There's a tendency to, especially if you're like me, I like to be in control. I have that problem of wanting to be in control. So you constantly have your hands in it. I think you said something there that I think is so powerful is learning to relieve some of that to some other people and giving them a chance because it does two things, right? One, it gives you some of that mind space to be able to enjoy some things, but also gives us an opportunity to our employees to grow and have an opportunity to get better and maybe rise to the occasion. And I think a lot of people forget that. Like they forget that those people that work under you that are wanting an opportunity to learn and kind of rise to the occasion that otherwise, if you don't allow them, they're just going to be, they may not be there. They get bored, right? So giving them that opportunity to do that is rewarding to you as well to see them do that, to grow and be like, oh, that's the next me right there, that stepped in and is learning and doing those things. So that's good. So I'm sure with your business, this has never happened where a deal went sideways or fell apart or, kept you up all night. We've all had those. I was, being funny, but what in that moment did you learn about, what did you take away from that after all that did fall sideways or that client or whatever? Like what was it that you learned or walked away with from that experience?
Obviously, so yes, and it hasn't happened just once.
Oh yeah.
But I think in every one of those experiences, you walk away with at least one and usually multiple things that you say, I will never do that again. I'm
Yeah,
never
that's
going to
good.
do that again. I'm
That's
not
good.
going to, fall into that trap again or make that mistake again. And then sometimes you're mad at yourself or, exposing yourself or, it's just sometimes they're easily preventable things. And
Yeah.
it maybe you said something the wrong way and then they misunderstood it. And then it went from, yeah, we're going to do it to no, we're not going to do it. And it happens. And so I think the lesson varies each time because it's not like it's happened and then now um we're never going to have that experience again. I mean, we
Yeah.
are, but the goal is not to repeat that same experience ever again, you know? Have it be a different learning lesson. So I think the lesson's different every time, and it varies on what the problem of the situation is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get it. I think you're absolutely right. I think you know, you should, I always say it this, I tell people all the time, like, I don't think you're ever at an age where you stop learning or you stop adapting and stop evolving because, even in on your own business, there's things that happen that you like you said, okay, that happened. How do we correct that or how do we fix that or does it need to be fixed? Not all the times is it something broken. It's just, sometimes things just go sideways and it's out of control. That's not a reflection on you. That's just a reflection that maybe, you gotta kinda evaluate it from a lens, I think, as an owner. Is that a process problem? If it is a process problem, can we get better at that process problem, make it better? Because if it is, that's solvable, right? You just kinda learn from them. I think that's the key is, like you said, just learning and being able to adapt to get better. We're always gonna be doing that, right? I mean, you don't ever stop doing that.
Yep. Yeah. And quite honestly, I mean, this sounds terrible, but I mean, sometimes it's like if you feel like you're engaged with a person and you're not comfortable with that person becoming a potential client and then you keep pursuing it, sometimes the mistake is I'm never going to engage in somebody with that type of personality again,
Yeah,
I just don't want to go through the trouble. So sometimes it's that. Other times it's process driven or it's just, steps driven or one thing I will say about like my presentation, people say, "Oh, your presentation's good." Well, it better be good. I mean, I've have hundreds of clients and I've done that presentation thousands of times. And when I first started doing it, I would get the same question like, "What about this?" And if I got that question 3 times, I would be like, clearly, I'm not doing a good job addressing that question. Let
that's
me
good.
build into my presentation that question being addressed. So now in my presentation, quite honestly, it varies at the end when we talk about the individual, but the beginning 30, 40 minutes, is the same exact presentation every time. I'm
Yeah.
almost word for word the same on every single presentation because I know it's stuff that needs to get covered, and I know that I can cover in a way that they take away, okay, he said this.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's constantly learning and it's constantly adjusting. And just by the presentation, I've learned that over time. I'm like, wow, there's a gap here. And then maybe I throw on an extra slide. I only use like half the slides in my slide deck because I don't want to overwhelm people,
Yeah.
but I adjust it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably so much information, like, you don't have, 'cause and listen, people attention span's not, 2 hours to sit there. They wanna know, and they wanna know all the information in the shortest amount of time that they can get it, and it's sometimes as a presenter, it's hard to do, right? To try to get all that into a little bundle, not always easy to do, and because then they start asking questions, and they move into a different direction, and then next thing you know, you're down in a rabbit.
Even to do it in 30 to 40 minutes for me is I know I'm hitting people with a lot of info and I'm talking fast as I do it to get it done in that time frame.
Yeah.
But there is also stuff in my industry that I'm required to cover. So I do have to make it part of my presentation.
So we're getting, we're kind of moving on through this podcast. It's been fantastic. I guess I want to transition just to ask a question or so a little bit about, what is one thing now that where you sit at today as a company owner and with insurance, like what is something that you're noticing out there in this, that's different than it was 5 or 6 years ago? Maybe just one thing that you're like, this has changed and you're seeing some changes in maybe a way it's approached or how things are done, or even the people that you're reaching out to.
Well, number one is the cost is obviously much different than it was 5 years ago. And because of that, there are cost pressures, and so the insurance companies can't just continue to raise costs. I mean, they do have to raise costs to meet their own inflationary needs that they're facing. But what you notice a lot more is that there are other tools that they utilize that they can put in place, prior authorizations, stuff like that to limit how many times somebody or quantity limits with a prescription. So there's a lot more of causing people to kind of engage and do things that they don't they don't like to do. So there's a lot more of coaching that process and having people understand that climate that they have to do things to maintain. I mean, it helps their cost if they can do those things. But yeah, that's the biggest change, but that's probably never going to go away.
Yeah.
So, the biggest positive change I will say from literally 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, or even I'd call it pre-COVID, is the amount of technology we have at our hands that we're able to expedite and do all these things and record everything much easier. That's been, you know, fantastic, and it makes it much more efficient, and it gives us the ability to get information in people's hands, and even though my age demographic stays the same,
Yeah.
65 and older, the 65-year-olds from 5 years ago versus the 65-year-olds from now are much more adept at learning and being able to
Yeah.
utilize technology. So a lot of that's made my life easier. The rising cost of benefits and then the scaling back of benefits, that's been challenging, but I don't anticipate that will ever go away.
Yeah. Are you seeing in your profession and where you are, AI is a big word out there, right? A lot of people talk about AI. It's kind of out there. Are you seeing that in your industry? If so, what have you experienced?
No, yeah, absolutely. As a business owner, you see it, you will utilize it a lot for your processes and procedures and um, compliance, all that stuff. It helps with. It helps solve problems and gives us some advice, and you can build in models to kind of deploy that keeps the ability to have to hire a bunch of people to do something down. People look up info on AI. AI isn't quite there with the nuance of Medicare yet. Because sometimes they'll say, well, ChatGPT said this, whatever it may be. Well, that's great. And that would be right in certain circumstances, but it's not necessarily right in this circumstance. I'm sure it'll get better and get there eventually. But yeah, that's how I kind of see it both on the end user side and then kind of internally on our side. It's certainly something that's not going away, obviously.
No, I don't. I certainly don't think it's going away. I think it's going to do nothing. It's evolving so fast, And I talk to people. I talk the same questions I ask on every podcast with people because it is something that's relevant in our world today, especially if you're a business owner. You got to be a little understanding of AI because it's here. Like it's not going. You're right. It's not going away. It's just getting better and better and better and better. Right. I find
Yeah, and
more
it's a
people
great
now.
tool.
It is, and it's
Great tool.
it's all about perspective and how you're using it. And I'm a firm believer. Listen, this is I do this. I do AI automation process for people all the time, and I tell people all the time, I love it. It's a great tool, but there's also a greatness in the human element too. And I think you have to take both into consideration and be able to use them together. Because there's certain things that AI can help with, and then there's that human element that you're never going to change. That you know connection with people. And I don't think we should. I think human element is big. I mean, I think COVID, we all hibernated or we all went to our own space and we closed up and we got to a place where we quit talking to people. And I don't want AI. My fear is I don't want AI to create that too, so that we're just back into that bubble again, and we're not having that human element. And so I think it's important that we use the tool and we use it in an effective way, but we also have that human element. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's my belief.
Well, listen, you're talking to someone that in an industry that there isn't many physical locations has a physical location. So I am totally on board with that. And as you mentioned earlier, my physical location is 3 doors down from Social Security. So
Yeah.
for us, the people that walk in, and I think we're at a year at our location. And in terms of walk-ins, you're talking about 160 to 180 people have walked in over the
Wow.
course of that 12 months. So, yeah, people are dying to sit down and have somebody explain stuff to them.
That's
Um,
cool.
and
That's
and
cool.
quite honestly, the feedback we get is, "This is great. I'm so glad you guys are here. I'm so glad we talked to you." So, yeah, to me, that human element's a big deal. And quite honestly, a lot of the stuff that we were able to solve with the person with us. So that helps too. So we invest heavily in the human element by just having a location.
Yeah, and I think that's so good that you've had that people come in there because we have to understand that in the demographics of where we are, age of people and all that is, we have a older generation that still is very much didn't grow up on the technology like it is today, and like when our kids start when they get 65, it's going to be a different game because they grew up with it, right? But that human element is so I think it's something that I hope that we just keep because I just there's nothing more that can light people up when they start having human interaction. There's just something in the brain that just lights people up, and so I think it's important that we do that, and I think it's important that we continue to have that. So it's really good to hear that you do that, have that office where people can come in and they're not going to get an operator or a clone. They're going to get a human being in there. I think that's
Yeah,
cool.
exactly. Yep.
Well, David, it is really we're coming to the end. It's been such a pleasure having you on my podcast, and my podcast is called Process Over Pressure, and for a reason is I think that the things that we talked about, the processes, these things allows us to have less pressure if we have the right processes. So that's why it's important. So if people are out there and they want to talk to you and find out more and learn more and maybe come visit you, would you share maybe your location and how they could connect with you and how they could reach you?
Yeah, our physical location is in Massachusetts, right in Hanover. Like I had mentioned, we're 3 doors down from Social Security, so our address is 98 Columbia Road in Hanover. We're right off one of the main roads there, right up the street from the Hanover Mall and off the exit for exit 3 in 2 different places. We're kind of in between the 2 exits. So people can come in at any time. We're there from 9 to 5. And then in terms of getting in touch with me, my website is S is in senior, H is in health, I is in insurance, SHI advisors, ADVISORS.com. And they can make appointments with me there. They can set up calls. They can see all the different services that we offer. There's a little piece about me and all the products. There's an education piece on Medicare and Medicare Advantage and Medicare Supplement and prescription drug plan. So and my contact info's there, emails, phone numbers, contact us. So that's the best way to get in touch with us. And we're always looking to talk to people, even though we have the location in Hanover, Mass. And Mass is our home state. We have 19 different states that we're licensed in and that we have clients in. So, this is something that we can do way outside Massachusetts. We're in pretty much every New England state, a lot of the southern states where there's warm weather and older people migrate to, and then on the West Coast as well, where it's warmer and there's nice weather. So, yeah, we're always looking to assist people in any way that we can. There is no cost to our services. We get paid by the carriers. So, there's no fee. So, if they have questions, concerns, they need some help, we're always there and available to help people.
David, that's great. Guys, you heard it. If you're out there and you're listening and you're trying to think about, you have questions. You just no obligation. You just want to kind of go through some questions with David and his team and really understand Medicare and your options and this, what a great resource to have to be able to call and set an appointment up and go through and ask the questions. You have a real live person that you can talk to. So David, thank you so much for being on the show today. You're great. You've been great, and I've really enjoyed our time together. So, thank you very much.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about our industry and our business. So, thank you for having me, and I hope people find some value in it.
Great. Thanks, guys. I'm Chad Paris with Process Over Pressure, stoneflyconsulting.com. Thank you.